pleasure to be here with you again in this year, in the first webinar of the year, the first in a series of training sessions that we have been developing through the effort of this interagency group. My name is Erika Calderon, and I work for the Inter-American Institute for Agricultural Cooperation, AICA. We are coordinating this interagency group to bring to you a whole preparation to respond and prevent the African swine fever and other cross-borders diseases. This group is comprised by OMSA, FAO, OIRSA, ACAM, CBP, CAFSA, CARIBET, COPEC, and the USDA. So there are many agencies that have gathered together and integrated to have a single training channel for all of the countries at every level, public and private, in this fight against African swine fever and other cross-borders diseases. I wanted to remind you that these webinars are being translated. We have simultaneous interpretation into Spanish, English, and French, and Portuguese. They are also being broadcast through social media in all 4 languages. Therefore, we invite you to remain here with us throughout all of this learning process, this sharing of experiences. This is the 3rd webinar in risk communication that we bring to you, and the first for this year 2023. So today we will have an action-packed agenda with a lot of experiences from many different countries, from several different sectors. We will have Beatriz Martinez, who is the communicator for the Secretariat for Agricultural and Rural Development of Mexico. She will bring the experience in risk communication on animal health in Mexico. We will also have the experience of Angela Neira, who is a consultant in communications, and she will tell us about preparing communication for risk assessment in animal health in Colombia. We will also have a presentation from Jose Luis Caram, who is the chairman of the Ibero-American Organization of Swine Growers, OIPORC. And at the end of all of these presentations, we will have a Q&A panel where we ask you all to send in your questions via the chat for the Q&A or the chat that we will make available to all of you through here, which is a regular chat. So without further ado, I don't want to take any more of your time because we have some great presentations for you. And now I will introduce Betty, as we know her. Beatriz Martinez, living Garcia. She has a degree in public communications and she graduated from the Latin American University. She has received several degrees from the Monterrey Technological Institute and higher learning at the College of Consultants. She has a specialty in commercial strategies and marketing and a master's degrees in project management, both from the Pan American University at the Mexico City campus. Betty's professional career is that she has 40 years of experience in livestock, 26 of which in the health field, occupying various positions. She is currently the Director of Development and Liaison at the National Agri-Food Health, Safety and Quality Service, a decentralized body of the Secretariat for Agriculture and Rural Development in Mexico. Throughout the years, she has always focused on communication and dissemination activities aimed at the productive agricultural, livestock, and aquaculture sector, as well as national and international tourists and the general public to help keep our country stay free of pests and diseases. As a result of these activities and the World Organization for Animal Health, she is a focal point of communication for Mexico and has participated in various groups of the North American Organization for Plant Protection. So, with this presentation, I now grant the floor to Betty so that she can make her presentation. I remind you, please send in your questions via the chat, and also let us know where you're from, what country, what organization you are from participating in this one. So, Betty, go ahead. Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Well, as Erica was saying, my name is Beatriz Martinez Reddy, and I'm from the Animal Health Service. We are part of the Secretariat for Agriculture here in Mexico. First of all, I thank you for the invitation to participate in this webinar. And well, we are also here to listen to your questions about my presentation. Well, the communication strategy for communicating risk in light of African swine fever in Mexico is very important because communication with society, the duty that is carried out by my institution, Senacica, is essential and delicate. Information that is poorly transmitted can generate chaos and cause unnecessary levels of alarm. In Senacica, we have a protocol for communication and responding to health emergencies that gives us the basis for coordination, flow, and appropriate management for information, as well as assigns official spokespersons for public announcements of health events as the sole authorized communication channel to provide information based on a suspicion or an alert or a health emergency. The information that is derived from these activities must be made available for decision-making purposes. The protocol stages for communicating in light of healthcare emergencies are three. The first is the initial stage, which communication starts in light of the suspicion of a healthcare risk, and a diagnostic is done. And in the event of a positive sanitary risk, then we immediately notify. We register the detection point based on diagnostic procedures. Strategic analysis of healthcare risk is conducted. As stage two, we follow up, which involves issuing an official communication for the notification and the application of healthcare measures in internal and external instances. We communicate the necessary healthcare measures that apply and activities that are carried out for the healthcare emergency. We share the follow-up reports daily, weekly, or monthly, according to each alert. And if necessary, then the national emergency device will be implemented and will be officially notified. These measures will be notified to the World Animal Health Organization, to the World Trade Organization, and to Mexico's commercial partners. The third stage is issuing a final report of the closure of the health emergency once all of the actions have been carried out and once determined that it's absent. We currently have a center. We have an operation center for healthcare emergencies, which in Spanish, its acronym is COES, COES. It involves a number of people according to their area of expertise. There's an interdisciplinary group to establish coordinated efforts together with the productive sector and institutions, both public and private, in light of a risk of African swine fever for Mexico due to the precedence that it exists in the American continent. Our authorities are very aware of all healthcare incidents and participate actively. So based on this notification, at the American continent. This group was created on August 17 of 2021, and up to now, they've had 29 follow-ups. We have interinstitutional support, and we have the cooperation of ministries of agriculture from countries like the US, the Dominican Republic, Denmark, and Haiti. And we cooperate with research institutions such as Complutense University from Spain, Purdue University from the US, and the Autonomous National University from Mexico. And we have a close partnership with the farmers' organizations, federal and state government institutions. Many of the topics that we approach in these sessions, which have the participation of approximately 90 people linked directly with the sector, and they pay attention to how the situation evolves, what measures are implemented, what actions are implemented by Mexico's government in light of African swine fever in Mexico. As I mentioned, we have a great mobilization by our institutions. Here we have our Secretary of Agriculture, our Director-in-Chief, and all of the people who participate in the African swine fever prevention group. And we did a mega drill. This was back in 2019, where we presented a potential scenario where African swine fever popped up and various institutions got involved. Now, since this has been of a preventive nature, I repeat that the Mexico's authorities are aware of the social and food problem in light of the disease entering our country. We participated in actions in the event that African swine fever were to present itself in our country, and how they need to act in light of the productive sector and society, such as this large-scale drill, which was carried out in 2019. And we've also had several conferences, technical scientific conferences that gather all of the productive chain of the swine production chain. Now we've identified also three main public objectives: farmers, to whom we send out communications. We have a program that is called Swine Yes, Swine No, which is to get them to report. They want to feed pigs in a responsible manner. They need to notify, they need to strengthen biosecurity measures. They need to inform workers about the measures they need to apply, restrict visits to the production units, and other communication activities for them. We also have communications aimed to hunters. And the motto is, a good hunter is not a risk hunter. If you hunt wild pigs abroad, do not bring them back to Mexico. And the message for them is to avoid trophy animals or products from hunting that could represent a risk. The travelers, we all know that travelers are a very high likelihood of contagion. We notify them that they need to be responsible travelers. And we speak that if you like pork, help us to protect it. Do not bring pork products from abroad. Do not transport swine products. Declare if you visited a swine farm. Declare whether you're traveling with swine. We also have a campaign that is very intense, where we started tackling this topic of ASF. We have TikTok platforms where so far we have 14 publications with more than 20,961 users reached. On Instagram, we have 6 posts that have reached out to 16,360 users. On Twitter, we have 10, where we've reached 8,662 users. 12 publications on Facebook are reaching out to 87,000 users. So far, throughout the year 2022, we reached out to 133,000 individuals with a total of 42 posts. And the topics that we have tackled through our platform have been what ASF is. We have an application that is both for Android and iOS, which is called Avise. And we are constantly promoting farmers. We're asking farmers to download the app, and that in light of any case of suspicion, they should notify it via this app. We give them the information about transmission pathways. We have recommendations on biosecurity and messages to tourists recommending that they do not mobilize swine products. This is the app, Avise. We ask people to download it so that they can do real-time notifications, and the technical staff immediately responds to rule out or confirm any ASF case. We also have a mailing platform and our institutional webpage, where we always permanently have information with regards to ASF. In 2022, through our mailing list, we sent out 42 communications to 150,000 users external to our institution. And internally, we also have a campaign where we've sent 45 communications, reaching out to 129,000 users. Here you have some information that we're displaying on screen, and on our institutional website, we always cover the topic concerning ASF permanently, and we have information for travelers as well. Likewise, here I will take the opportunity to show you some communication materials that are aimed to the measures that need to be taken at the farm level, biosecurity measures, information aimed to farmers to create awareness, information for tourists and for hunters. All of this material was developed to have it ready at any point whenever, unfortunately, we may get a notification of ASF in Mexico. These materials are held by all of the national institutions, so that in the event that a case is confirmed, immediately they may take the necessary measures and may distribute this material in all of their offices throughout Mexico. We have some other leaflets. The circle one, we distribute that one. It was aimed mainly to travelers. And this material is also available. The one on the left also is a leaflet that discusses the measures that the productive cycle needs to implement. Here we have several audiovisual materials. We have 4 videos. We have one, which is a notification to farmers, which includes information for airports, and also another video to create awareness among tourists. We have 3 radio advertisements that discuss the symptoms, the importance not to give leftovers to animals, and to prevent the spread. We also have 2 loudspeaker messengers, which speak of biosecurity and avoiding the spread of the disease. I'll show you a video as an example of what we have. Swine yes, swine no. Pay attention to your pigs and notify. The African swine fever is a disease that in a short amount of time can kill all of the pigs on a farm. If you notice a lack of appetite, weakness, fever, nasal discharge, difficulty breathing, vomiting, purple coloring or bruising behind the ears, abdomen, or skin, diarrhea, bloody mucus, miscarriages, high mortality rates, notify us. Emergency phone number 800-751-2100, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Also, you can notify us via any of the offices of the SENASICA or at the Committee for the Development of the Agricultural Area. SENASICA, healthy agriculture for well-being. Mexico's government.
Por si sí o por si no, échale un ojo a sus.
Bueno, como vieron, ese es un
Well,
material muy...
as you saw, this is very simple, very brief, very to-the-point material. And with this, we've reached out our target audience. We've also created designs supporting the Mexican pork industry, and we distribute these in various risk points throughout the country. We place these banners. We have a big problem with immigrants. So we have some communications aimed to them so that they can avoid, when they're going through the country, to not transport pork products with them. We also have on the webpage banners for hunters, for travelers, and for the productive sector, which at the end of the day are our primary audience, without forgetting to mention that the foreign is very important as well. We've created preventive spread campaigns. Our Sinasica campaign called 2022, we published advertisements in several newspapers from Tamaulipas. On the webpage, there's a report from one of the main audiovisual companies in Mexico. Here are some of the pictures of this communication. And we've also had a very strong interinstitutional link with authorities that have presence that is very, very important at the national level. One is the National Institute for Indigenous People. We permanently, on Wednesdays, have an interview where we're given time to communicate to the indigenous people of Mexico. And the director for animal health has already had an interview there. We have links with producer organizations. They printed 50,000 banners to promote notification, offering a reward to those who report their animals. And if regrettably it's confirmed that they have ASF, they are given this reward. The Veterinary Physicians Organization also has a big presence, and they have an important contact with livestock unions, with different organizations, and they share communication materials. We also have the Mexican Swine Institute, which is constantly sharing our messages on their social networks. We have the National Institute for Forestry, Agricultural, and Livestock Research. We also have a close relationship with them. They are supporting us in creating awareness of our information, and the Agricultural Controller's Office, which is helping us share information about notifying in light of ASF. We know that notification is seen by farmers as part of their culture. We would have a high advantage of being able to identify in a timely fashion the presence of this disease. Challenges of risk communication. Well, obviously, it requires perfect communication in real time of information between experts and the general public. It's necessary to know your audience and understand the situation before it happens. You need to establish action protocols, which depends largely on the budget, because obviously it's not just Mexico's case, possibly many other countries. We often lack the necessary resources to hire or pay the media, and it's difficult to execute, but we still do it through several different platforms. And we know it's necessary to generate empathy, the authorities and the other supports. We need to identify authorities and organizations that may support reaching out to the objectives and establishing efficient links. We have the indicators of an effective campaign, which is sharing information through the networks. We look at the results of the studies of our campaigns post-test that allows us to establish metrics about what we've achieved, and greater information, greater application of measures, and less application of technical activities. We know that if we have good communication, the technical effort is made easier.
Y bueno, las lecciones aprendidas, tarde o temprano, la enfermedad sabemos que va a llegar a México.
We know that sooner or later, this is going to come to Mexico. We have to be ready so that the effects are not as terrible as they have been in other countries, and an institutional coordination of technicians of operations and identified by public with the introduction of the SOHA and also with African swine fever, and with associations that are willing to cooperate in disseminating information, such as that of the support to the migrants that we have in Mexico, and the budget to hire the services that are required, to convince the technicians that are experts that the information has to be brief and comprehensible so that we can have the information. And we see with them that we have come to the adequate indications to have the management of the organizations that regulate the information and to allow the sacrifice of those animals that are infected and the depopulation of the farms and business area on my side. That will be all. Thank you very much. And I am at your service for any communication that you might require. Thank you. Thank you, Erika. Once again, thank you for the invitation. Thank you, Betty. This was an excellent presentation. You give us an example of all the hard job that is required to be ready in the communication of risks, to be able to face transbordering illness like such as the African swine fever. And I take this opportunity to remind you that this has been an effort that is in coordination between many agencies. We are under the umbrella of the GISAT, and that is why we have here Dr. Rocio Camposano. She is a veterinarian physician, and she is a regional office for the DIETAT project, and she is accompanying us week after week in these meetings that are integrated between the agencies so that we might be ready and have you receive all these webinars and all this training that we want you to disseminate all throughout the different agencies, all the different levels, both official as well as public and private, the academia, so that they might disseminate all this information and that there might be every day more people that are interested in this topic with a very important role to perform. They're participating in these trainings that are carried out month after month. So, please do not forget to make your questions through the chat. We have available both in social networks as well as in Zoom. And well, this is just to remind you that this is the third webinar for the communication of risks, where we are bringing to you the experiences from Mexico, as we have just seen, in the wonderful presentation by Betty, the experience of Colombia through Angela, and the experience of the private sector through Dr. Scaran. And also, well, to let you know that we are accompanied by participants from El Salvador, Colombia, in the official sector, the ICA, Mexico, Venezuela, Guatemala, and Belize. We are also seen from the ICA Colombia and from the ICA Nicaragua. So we invite all of you to register where you're participating from, what agency are you representing, and what country. Okay, so we are going to proceed with our next presentation. That is to be carried out by Angela Lucero Meira. A small presentation from her. She is a social communicator and journalist that specializes in the communication, organizational communication. She was editor for a national circulation journal, and she worked as journalist in the offices of communications in the Denduria of the National Treasury. The Institute for the Recreation and Sport, and the General Directory of Customs, National Customs, 24 years of experience in the agro-livestock sector, and she was the head of the Office of Communications of the Colombian Agropecuary Institute, the ICA, in Colombia between 2008 to 2011. She is a consultant for the FAO since 2011 in different projects like mouth-to-mouth disease in the Zika in Central America and resistance to the microbials in 6 countries of South America. She is a consultant for the Research Center of the Pragmatics in Palm since the year 2013. And in 2013, she founded Eventos Colombia Design and Communication, a family business that provides advisory and communication and develops projects from VICA. With this introduction, with this small summary of her experience, I would like to give the floor so that she might comment to us about the risk communication and the experience held in Colombia. Angela, please, the floor is yours. Erika, good morning. Good morning to all of you. And thank you very much for this invitation. I would like to know if you are looking at my screen. Yes, we see it and we can hear you also. Thank you. Wonderful, Erika. Thank you. Well, a warm greeting to all of you. Once again, thank you, Erika, for the presentation and the invitation. Honestly, it is a pleasure to be able to share with you the experiences that we have had throughout this working time in this very beautiful sector, such as the agro-livestock sector, and the investment that we have done in this topic of communication of risk. Well, puts us in a very important situation, a job that requires a lot of dedication and a lot of complement when we face the transbordering illnesses. So, I would like to begin with a phrase that was coined in 2014 by a coordinator of the international activities of the National Center for Epidemiology and Health Sanity.
La comunicación de riesgos es posiblemente una de las fases del proceso de análisis de riesgos más difíciles de llevar a cabo eficazmente. Esto porque la comunicación efectiva del riesgo requiere dedicación y esfuerzo y es algo que no se da por sí solo ni por sí misma y que el simple hecho de diseminar información sin considerar comunicar las complejidades e incertidumbre del riesgo no asegura una comunicación efectiva. Finaliza esta frase diciendo que ante todo
He finalizes this phrase by saying that before it all, it is a process that requires to be very well planned to be able to achieve the objectives that we are proposing. In the presence of the illnesses, transporting illnesses, we see ourselves advocated to different situations, but especially to a situation of threat, a threat that might put at risk the sanitary health of a country, and therefore the international trade that might be generated through the production of certain products, certain byproducts, or the development of a productive project. And it also generates a risk for productivity and for the quality of life of the people that are involved in this process. And in the case of the African swine fever, the affection involves not only those who are dedicated to the process of selection and to the authorities that are involved, but also it has a link to other factors that many times it might be very distant to what it implies to have the risk of sanitary health, which is the case of the messengers, what was being mentioned just a minute ago by Betty, all those stakeholders that are a part of these very important audiences in this type of illnesses and with which definitely we have to work with. So in this process, in view of this threat, we must work on trying to achieve the inclusion of all these stakeholders, of all these audiences in view of a risk that for many is intangible and for many others might be unknown, and that we have to talk about the implications that this risk might have for the livelihood of the animals, for the sanitary situation of the animals, but also for related to an economic situation and a situation that affects the life condition of producers of this productive process. And apart from that, we have to achieve to see the mobilization and the active participation so that we can prevent the income of the illnesses in these stages where prior to the identification of the illness, as it was very well mentioned a few moments ago, that that we're coming with the risk always present. All those audiences that have a commitment with the situation and the decision making to be able to avoid and make the risk minor. We have to have an active participation, and we have to work from beforehand to be able to achieve that the participation and that active mobilization. And there is a step that goes beyond this, that is way ahead in all this process of the communication of the risk, and it is the change of behavior of multiple stakeholders that are key for to avoid the income or after the illness has been introduced to take action.
Oportunas para evitar una crisis mayor.
Ángela.
To carry out actions to avoid a major crisis. So in this environment of the communication, there are different approaches.
No, que te está fallando un poquito el internet, entonces tal vez.
No, it's that your internet is failing a little bit. Maybe you can turn off your camera so that you might have a better internet, better connection. Thank you. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Listo. ¿Ahora sí me escuchan mejor?
Sí.
Can you hear me better? Yes,
Sí.
the only thing is that you stopped sharing your screen.
Hola, hola.
¿Me escuchas, Ángela?
Can you hear me, Angela?
Déjate de compartir.
Ya la vamos a compartir.
Ok, perfecto.
You stopped sharing your screen.
Sí, hay un breve retraso, seguramente.
There is a small delay, maybe, but the important thing is that it's coming.
Disculpas por este en el sitio donde estoy, un problema de internet, estoy conectada desde el
Please
celular.
forgive me, but we have a problem with the internet, but I hope that this will improve the situation. Okay. So in this process of the communication, we can use different approaches.
Nos permite llegar a los públicos que
The science
requerimos
of communication that allows us to reach the target audiences so that we can communicate these risks that we have to attend to from different organizations and from our different roles within the communication. One of them is the dissemination, and this is the process in which we have to disseminate the content and put it at the reach of all those target audiences that we have to communicate this information to. The other is the concentration, that awareness, and this with the idea that the people that are involved will, in this risk situation, might generate and be able to make decisions based on information. And this process requires a job that is beyond the dissemination, because we expect a change of attitude in presence of what is happening. And another first step is the sanitary education, which tries to seek for a change of behavior. And this is the work of the sanitary institution to try to modify the way in which the people proceed in the presence of that risk that is being presented, that is being generated in this case by the African swine fever. And they asked us when we talked with Monica and talking about the presentation that they wanted me to do, about how that team of communications of the risk is the ideal team would be to be able to communicate this type of risk to the general audience. And as I said a while ago, we always have the necessary resource to be able to attend to these situations. And this is where an issue of creativity is fundamental, but it is also fundamental that both types of communication as well as the technical teams have to work hand in hand. This awareness, this deepening into the technical issues on behalf of the communicators, and this lack of knowledge also and work on communication by the technicians is fundamental, so that a risk communication team of a certain area might have and the adequate influence. We cannot do the job independently, and it is not a job that is exclusive to the communicator to generate these strategies that are required for the management of the transbordering illnesses. And so here we are presenting some of the ideas of what an ideal team for the communication of risk would be. Hopefully to be able to have experts in the communication of risk, our communicators or journalists have to support themselves on the part of the development of content. Obviously, we have the leaders, the veterinarians, the infectiologists, they have to be part of that so that they can communicate in an adequate and timely manner that information. And it has happened to all of us, as Beatriz mentioned a little while ago, that we all have to understand that we have to do a translation of the technical language so that the people to whom these messages are addressed might be able to effectively have clear and concise information. And that is the job that we have to do among us because the technical team and the communication team. In addition to that, within the risk communication team, there have to be present the strategic partners. And there is an important part, which is to see how that link to the strategic aspects might be. And that might come from the private sector, from the public sector, from non-governmental organizations, from associations and groups of producers. This is fundamental to be able to potentiate and to reach the greatest coverage of all the job that is done in communication from the veterinary sector. So thinking about the African swine fever, obviously the Ministry of Agriculture, the Ministry of Communication, and we might even have the participation, important participation, to be able to potentiate the visibility that is necessary for the strategies of communication. Evidently, the local authorities, the municipal authorities, in the case of Colombia, they have the capacity or they have to have the capability of reaching those territories, and they can also be very strategic, fundamental partners for the development of the strategies and for its dissemination on the field. Obviously, as I was mentioning, the communicators and the associations from the different sectors and also technicians from the private sector. Other support that would be wonderful to have. Sorry, the French audio is coming in. Experts in the change, behavioral change, and social experts. And I put a last one here, that is the YouTubers, and this taking into account that the social networks nowadays are establishing the starting point, and this is a channel that allows us to economically reach that public, that target audience, that every time are every day more linked to these channels of communication. Within the social networks, it is important to point out, for example, not only YouTube, but also WhatsApp, that has become one of the most important tools for the penetration of information. And this allows us to come close in a timely manner to that audience that we want to reach. Which are then the functions of the risk communication teams? Well, the most important thing is to carry out a job prior to the presentation of a case of African swine fever in one of our countries. It is a job that has to be done with enough anticipation, with an analysis of the communications that we have had. What are we missing? How can we strengthen it? A review of the technical information and the lessons learned from other countries, especially in this of being able to know what Beatriz was mentioning a while ago. It is fundamental, and it is a great contribution to be able to generate that construction or consolidation of our strategies in the different countries. So to be able to come close to those experiences and lessons, that is something that is very important to be able to generate the job that is necessary to be carried out by the risk communication team. To identify and characterize the target audiences, that is a fundamental part I think that this has been one of the learnings that has given us the most lessons. And this is that we have to have involved in this process a very important deal of stakeholders, that all of them are important, that all of them have different feelings with regard to this situation. And the question then would be, can we talk to all of them in the same manner? And I think that for us, it is clear that no, the answer would be no. To be able to talk to the different audiences, we have to know them, we have to characterize them, and we have to be able to anticipate which are the needs of information, what are their needs of knowledge, and in what way or how can we deepen into the needs of each one of them. We also have to identify and we have to do close to those strategic partners, as as I mentioned before. We have to have trained spokespersons that are sympathetic, that have clarity about the technical information that we are going to share, and that they may be at a given moment, not only at the moment of crisis, but also in this process of prevention, to be able to call the attention and create awareness among our audiences so that they might really understand how they have to commit and to see what are the technical proposals that are made to try to prevent the entrance of that illness. One of the most important things is that we have to hear and identify which are the key audiences, and we can do this by checking our social networks to look at the declarations that we have there, what's happening on the social network with regard to this, what are they saying, what is moving in this topic related to the African swine fever, and also on the territory, on the ground, listen to them, understand what are their concerns, and to know exactly how are they trying to disseminate the information for the reduction of the risk of the entrance of the illness. Also, maintain permanent contact with the journalist. Here, further on, we're going to present a little bit in this topic of the relationship with the communication media, because this is a key audience, a target audience, so that we can reach in a massive manner the audiences that for which we are generating this type of information or strategy. So this inventory of journalists is this permanent contact should not take place only at the moment in which we require their action so as to disseminate information that we need to have disseminated. This is a job that has to be maintained in time, that has to generate trust or confidence so that we can take advantage of this knowledge and this confidence in moments in which a crisis might take place, and that this moment of prevention in which we also need a broad dissemination of what might happen in case the illness is admitted into the country. And this type of communications has also, our communicators also has to be trained in two ways. One, the technical part for the communications, and the part of communications in the technical matters. And I think that this is important to understand that we are clear that they have their roles very well defined. They have to know what is the technical part regarding the indicators that is fundamental to be able to carry out the exercise and develop the strategies for communication that are required. And at the same time, the technicians have to know about communications to go deeper into those ways of communicating. Is something that enriches the communication of this team. Very important to get to know what are our weaknesses, strengths, the weaknesses, strengths, and opportunities, and to put on a paper what it is that we have to improve. How can we do it? What changes must we carry out so that we can have these capacities that we have or that we're lacking of to be able to have them covered and improved and covered by other entities, or to look for alliances that will allow us to achieve a good intervention, successful intervention that will have the adequate coverage among the audiences that we are trying to reach. And very important also to get to know the analysis, to get to know the perception that we have about the risk, and all these things that we developed a team for the development of risk, and that is fundamental so that we can do the construction of a strategy. And I made an analysis, a very quick analysis of
avanzadas hoy con el tema de peste porcina africana y están los productores de pequeña, mediana y gran escala, el sector privado, el sector veterinario
to what are the necessities and the work, the sector, the workers of the sector, the transporters also, they have to sit here, the technical assistants, independent authorities for the analysis, massive media, and the technical teams for sanity. These target here audiences require an intervention, a personalized intervention, I would say, in a specific manner, as I said, regarding their role, their perception, their characterization, but also in this point, number 6, of the technical teams and sanity teams, I think that it is also important to understand that we have to make a communication to the inside of the organizations, to the inside of the veterinarian associations, because this awareness and greatness of a conscience regarding the importance of the illness is very important. And also that these technical teams, they are on the field, that many times they are not in decision making at the national level, well, that they might have that permanent information of all the job that is being carried out in communication, of all the technical job that is bases fundamental communication strategies. And these people are not going to be our spokesperson, the people that bring the information, and then in many cases, they will hear the strategies for communication that are proposed at a national level. So, it is important that apart from understanding who our audiences are for the development of the communication strategy, we have to know what is the opinion of this idea, audiences in regard to the thing that is being communicated. The perception of the risk has to do with strategy. It is the way this risk is going to be faced and what is the assessment of the different audiences provide to this risk. So in a study for the presentation, to know what the audiences have, what confidence and acceptance to the policies and the measures that are being proposed have for the organism, for the control, and for the prevention. How vulnerable do these people feel these groups of interest feel in view of this risk? How do they consider, how do they see the graveness of the situation that might take place? And this is something that has to do more with the producers, but also when we are formulating this strategy of communication it's important to generate that concern that in regard to the transfer of information of how we can identify the illness. This is the effect that this has on the economy, the sanity of the people that work in these sectors, in these productive sectors of the swine production. They also, what kind of perception do we have in the view of controlling the damage? Many times, our producers feel that they are vulnerable, that this is not going to happen, that that's not going to happen to them, so that they don't have to make any, they don't have to take any measure to prevent the entrance of that illness to their farms, to their production farms. So to know how much fear do they have facing the situation and the control that they might give to the situation, that is something that is important to understand their perception of risk. And also the potential of damage that is attributed to the risk, that is, would this cause a grave problem or not such a great problem? And sometimes also this type of illnesses that are still not present in our countries, we see them like very distant. So we think that delaying the consequences does not allow us to relax, allows us to relax ourselves, and that's where we have to maintain a permanent communication job for the preventions, to have the producers understand that once the risk or the illness comes in, well, there is not going to be any time to act. There is time to act, but we're going to have to be much more preventive to avoid that, and then to have to act in a reactive manner, not in an improvised manner, but to make decisions on the road. And so when we have a job in prevention that is strengthened, so we can act better whenever we have the admission of the illness. And also, this analysis of the perception of the risk is to understand the magnitude of the risk that is present. Many times, because of this distance and not having it in the country yet, so many times we don't have, a situation of the measures for what we have. So we are looking to act to the presence of the illness. So with this information and the experience that we've had, I have been able to understand and interiorize that with the knowledge of, without the knowledge of these audiences, without their knowledge and awareness, it is not easy to create an effective communication strategy. With that information is that we have to continue on working in the process for the construction of our communication strategy. As it well says it here, we have to determine our objectives. We have to construct our messages. We have to determine the channels of communication. And we have to set a strategy and evaluate it. In this process of the definition of the objectives, it is important to analyze how we should act in the different scenarios, in the scenario of the prevention, and the scenario of the crisis, so that we might be able to have very clear how it is that we have to operate in these two situations. The construction of messages is very important, and in that we it comes into play the work of the technical team and the work of the communicators, and is a key issue to be able to produce the messages that will really comply with the scientific rigorness that these type of information might have, but that they can also at the same time be clear, concise messages that will call to action, so that people that might listen to them might interiorize them in a simple manner.
También es muy
And
importante.
here, it's also very important, the participation of stakeholder audiences. This communication work is not an effort that we do on our own from our desks. This is an effort that generates a permanent contact. We need to be able to listen to our stakeholder audiences. We need to engage them from the very inception when we're generating the strategy, because it is therein that lies the information that we need to develop value-added strategies in risk communication. I will now focus on the work with the media. The media are key allies in these prevention and crisis management processes in light of any cross-border diseases or pests. The media definitely are a voice that allow us to reach out to the masses and reach various audiences. And that is why, as I mentioned earlier, we need to keep permanent contact with them. We need to develop a level of trust that guarantees that whenever we need them to act, first of all, they need to know what we're talking about. They need to understand the technical side of things. They need to be able to identify false news. They need to be in permanent contact with us so that we can be the reliable source of information that generates that information, the knowledge that needs to be notified to the various audiences. So today, in addition to mass media, the traditional media, radio, press, TV, we also have social media, which are key in this communication process. And they can be our own social media. These, we don't need a lobby to reach out to them. We can share information freely on them. So our own media, we need to leverage fully when we're generating our information to reach out to the various target audiences. Here, among our own media, we have social networks, podcasts, our own publishing, web pages, mailing lists, and in this realm of generating communication strategies aimed at the media, we also need to be highly creative. But in our own media, there are many alternatives that we can link to our communication strategies that can generate reminders, that can aim or that can enhance our efforts with the various audiences that we work with. These can be games, contests, mobile apps, which currently are very popular and that can share information in a simple manner. We were just being told that in Mexico, they use an app to gather information that is very important for technical decision making. Now, the mass media, first of all, are an effective pathway to promote and create awareness about a cause. They play a key role in mobilizing public support, and they are essential in light of a crisis and also in prevention. Meaning that this effort that we need to do with the media is based on the knowledge of how they work. Currently, the simple fact of sending a press release, that doesn't mean that we have managed to catch their attention among their busy schedules. So there's a constant struggle by many sources to gather the attention of the media that is necessary in order to be able to communicate what we wish to share with our audiences. Therefore, we need to be very creative when we're generating these contents for the mass media. One recommendation on this point is that currently, perhaps, stories are easier to sell, to communicate. You need to add characters, people to the situations. You need to be able to tell the story of how an emergency situation can impact the livelihood of our farmers. We also need to connect that to the news. How we work with the mass media? Well, we need to establish trust. We need to be transparent in information management. It's important for our veterinary services to generate trust, build trust by sharing with them information in a timely manner, not concealing important information that needs to be divulged. We need to internally define how information is managed, but information needs to be shared. And we need to be able to generate that transparency in light of the information of the veterinary services. We need to permanently supply them with information, not just data, not just news, but also stories that can mobilize people, that can generate more engagement with regards to an important topic related to animal health. We need to understand how they function internally. We need to be very creative to catch their attention. But what I was saying a moment ago was that we, from our own media, we can generate the information whenever we're unable to catch the attention of the media itself. Now, it's also very important for journalists and for the media to receive ongoing training. Sometimes it's not easy. Sometimes it's not easy to gather all of the people from the media to any training activities, but it's still good for journalists to know a little bit more about a disease, about an emergency, because that way we can guarantee the risk of miscommunication is mitigated. And this ongoing training process can be much more simple. It can be easier because we can leverage things like Zoom meetings, like the one that we're holding just today. And we can, through these forums, generate a closer cooperation with the media so that in a time of crisis, they can be a very important partner for effective communication, effective information distributed to the various audiences. And obviously, once again, I go back to the same point. We need to be creative in approaching the mass media. And this approach requires spokespersons who are well prepared, well trained, who are aware of the technical topics, but who are also trained in communication, in media, so that they can also be trained in crisis management, because there will often be many questions, there will be information gaps, because during times of crisis, time is short, and we often don't have all of the information. We don't have all of the picture. So we need to train our spokespersons so that they can respond calmly to a situation and generate credibility and generate clarity in the information and to generate empathy with our target audiences and with the media itself in order to ensure that the space in the media is maintained and the people can receive the information they require. So we need to have spokespersons who are trained technically, that have a broad-ranging concept of communication, but that can also provide technical information without alarming people. Beatrice was mentioning a while ago that we need to review the information that we generate carefully, because we want to avoid being the ones who create problems or miscommunicate. It's also important to keep in mind that information that we generate through the media is not sufficient to achieve the communication processes. Communication processes are achieved by a one-to-one effort with the various audiences, with the farmers. It's not simply sending out some information and that's it. It's not simply sending out a leaflet on how to use an app directly. No, this communication effort is two-way communication with the farmers. It requires an approach. It requires an engagement with their livelihoods, understanding where they live, what their risks are, so that we can generate the level of empathy that we need in order to ensure their engagement and their alignment with our proposals to respond to an emergency or to deal with a pest or a disease or ASF. So we therefore need a dynamic communication that establishes a dialogue with our stakeholders, give them an opportunity to express what they feel, to express their concern. And based on awareness of their concerns, we can generate together with them the proposals that can guarantee that the information we need them to be aware of, the procedures we need them to be aware of, can reach out to them, and that the decision that they make is actually based on the technical knowledge needed to respond to a case like this, ASF. This is achieved thanks to a permanent process of interaction with various audiences and by trial and error, because we don't have a one-size-fits-all success formula. We need to constantly be reviewing what we're doing. We need to constantly shift direction if needed, but always based on that permanent contact with our audiences. Here, perhaps, I wanted to include a list of experiences that I had from the veterinary service, the experience in managing these diseases. We've had a wealth of experience on this field. The Institute is very clear about its duties towards the media, towards social network. But when we started in risk communication, I myself personally had to break down a paradigm. The fact that we needed to shift from simple information sharing to actual communication. And this is a call to action that we ask all veterinary services to respond to. Sometimes there's a lack of staff. Sometimes there are economic difficulties, budget difficulties, staffing difficulties, and it's hard to respond to all of these things. But communication is something that we need to understand. And it's something that we need to tackle, not simply as information sharing. Information sharing is a part of the process, but communication requires a process that involves additional support, reach out to the territory, and veterinary services need to understand that communication is not something that we generate from a communication office. We generate it together with the technicians and together with our audiences. And so this experience, which at the time, these trainings at universities were repeated. The communication offices are often just working on visibility of a topic, but we need to go one step beyond. And that step beyond means achieving risk communication that involves the engagement of the communities and providing them and building together with them and sharing knowledge with them so that the knowledge remains within the communities so that they themselves can respond to their situations with that level of knowledge and make decisions based on that information. Careful decisions that allow them to manage risk. Here is an ongoing learning. This communication with the communicators that we need to have is very important. We cannot communicate something that we're not aware of. So training on this technical topic is very important to be able to deal properly with risk communication. We need to permanently work with technical areas. We need to have an unbreakable bond with them to develop the appropriate strategies to develop or generate materials to support our key audiences. We need to be able to understand the farmers' realities and their livelihoods. We need to approach them and be closer to them. That approach provides us with a lot of information that we need concerning these audiences and what is the best way to reach out to them, respecting also their own knowledge, because there's something that is very important here. Agricultural workers, farmers have been doing their job for years. They have their own know-how, they have their own practices. Sometimes they're mistaken. Sometimes they need to improve them and enhance them, but we need to respect the knowledge that exists at the agricultural level, at the farmers level, among our audiences with regards to their situation, with regards to their risks, with regards to prevention. So what we seek here in a risk communication process is to make sure that all of us together, communicators, technicians, and producers, all work together. We need to combine respect for technical content and simple, clear content for the various audiences. This is a negotiation, and it becomes easier when communicators delve deeper in the technical field and the technical experts delve deeper in the knowledge of communication. It's fundamental to leverage contacts to build bridges in favor of communication. We cannot work in isolation. Veterinary services on their own do not have the capacity to reach out to all of these different stakeholders. So in the territory, in the various organizations, in other institutions or official organizations, there are big opportunities and big allies that can allow us to reach out with better coverage and to share our messages in times of prevention and in times of crisis in order to ensure that the various audiences may be engaged and committed to what we are suggested. Part of this group of allies is the private sector and strategic partners that can allow us to have better coverage. I'm not going to delve deeper into this, but this information is a bit obsolete. But the work that we do in communication is based on the practices, but it allows also producers and the various groups that we worked with to practice, get to know, to do what needs to be done to respond to a situation, which is why we hold drills, we hold meetings with farmers, and they're all fundamental to ensure that our risk communication strategies have a real impact. We need to integrate various types of farmers, various different ways of reaching out to them. They're all essential. That approach with them, that permanence, and that need to permanently engage them in that dialogue. We also need to work with unions and cooperatives. We need to approach these associations of small farmers. In the case of ASF, it's very important. So these small farmers associations, the local churches, and other scenarios where we ourselves can communicate the risk is very important to keep that cooperation going. This obviously requires some fundamental work and very careful work in generating content. We need to use multiple channels, the support of international organizations. And here I would like to make a brief parenthesis. Oftentimes, we have international organizations who are allies. My work with FAO has highlighted the possibility of supporting countries, in certain cases, in bringing closer tools that can contribute to improve the communication strategies. And so it's important that from that perspective as well, we need to leverage the opportunities we have with international organizations. We need to work with the media as well. So to have solid strategies that don't leave anyone behind, leave no one behind of the stakeholders that we need to engage. And it's also important for the veterinary services to keep in mind that we need to train on communication and in risk communication in particular, because the media and the world of information and communication is constantly evolving, and therefore we need ongoing training on this topic, on this type of strategies. Now, just simply wanted to share a work that I carry out with the oil palm sector in Colombia, and it engages all of these tools that we've discussed today. This involves our own media, which currently, for topics that are not crisis related, are fundamental to guarantee permanent information that gives visibility to successful experiences. We have our own press, which is called Healthy and Productive Palm, that brings stories to the farmers, that reaches out to these palm farmers that need to make decisions with regards to several important diseases. And they share information in a simple fashion. It's content that is based on technical information, but they are told through the stories and experiences of the farmers themselves. That is kind of the objective, the aim of this publication that we do for the palm sector. And that definitely has had a very good impact, because fortunately, we've been able to verify the fact that they read it, people understand it, people even ask for it, because they find in it the information that they need for decision-making purposes. We face situations among peers, and we also ask people to make decisions based on technical data. We also do printouts, audiovisual productions, short videos. We constantly work on social media. And this point, which is fundamental, is meeting the farmers. Meeting the farmers is, I think, the essential component in risk communication to ensure effective communication concerning the various problems that their sector may face. And also here, this is an effort that we do together with AICA ICA seminars through which we can share with the farmers and the decision makers information about different situations, about different diseases, risks, but the partnership between the public and the private sector is definitely, for this case, very important. This case with Sinipelma is a clear example of this. So this is a call to action. Seek partnerships, seek alliances, seek resources outside of your organizations. Oftentimes, we don't have these things internally in our veterinary services, but through these partnerships with other sectors, with other allies, we can achieve our goals in risk communication. And well, that's what I had for you today. I hope that you heard me clearly. I apologize for any communication problems or issues, and I hope that later on I'll be able to. Thank you very much, Angela. As you can all see, this is complementary. All of the foundations of risk communications are complementary. The presentation and that Beatriz and Martina before her, how to apply all of these recommendations that Angela is sharing and her experiences with Colombia. In addition, this gives us a glimpse of the fact that all of this training for risk communication, as well as other topics, such as preparing to respond to an emergency or preventing an emergency, helps us. All of this content that we're developing for ASL helps us with other cross-border diseases. So I invite you to look at all of this material we have been developing before, since back in 2021. We have been developing multiple topics in risk assessment, in compensation, lawmaking, etc. So we invite you, not just the swine sector, but also other sectors, to prepare to respond to any type of emergency that we may be facing today and that we're trying to prevent. So thank you very much, Angela. Your presentation has been very interesting and very fruitful and very timely for this time and place when we are preparing ourselves to respond to emergencies. Now, when Dr. Karan will be speaking, I will make a brief presentation for him. He is a professor at the Veterinary Medicine Faculty at the Veracruz University from 1981 to 1991. He also has been a professor for the postgraduate degree in public health from 1985 to 1990. He also has had experience in the private sector and organizations in developing companies from the livestock sector and the poultry sector, a balanced feed for animals, for pigs, and for aquaculture, contribution animal protein. He's been the chairman of the Confederation of Pig Farmers from 2013 to 2020. He's also been the founder and chairman of COMPA, the Mexican Council of Animal Protein, from 2016 to 2020. He's been an executive advisor to COLAPA, Latin American Council for Animal Protein, from 2014 to the present day. And he's also been a representative of the livestock farming of the National Agricultural Council from 2013 to 2015. And he's also been a spokesperson for the Mexican Council for Sustainable Rural Development from 2013 through 2018, and of the Commission for Sectorial Programs and Budgeting, ESAGARPA, from 2013 through 2018. He's been the chair of the National Organization for the Certification and Livestock Farming Verification from 2011 to 2013. Also a spokesperson of the National Committee for Agricultural Normalization from 2013 through 2018, representative of the sector at the Executive Commission for the Productivity of the Pig Farming Sector from 2013 through 2018, a representative of the Executive Commission of the Livestock pig farming sector from Zagarpa up to 2018, Secretary of the Veracruz State from 2008 to the present day, Chairman of Copover, the State Council of Pig Farmers of Veracruz from 2008 to the present day, and the Chairman of the Livestock Organization of Pig Farmer for Veracruz from 2008 to the present day. He's also been the chairman of OIPOR, the Ibero-American Organization of Pig Farmers from 2018 to the present day, and a member of the group of experts for the control of cross-border diseases among animals with UNZA from 2018 to the present day. So, as you can see, he has long-standing experience. Dr. Karam is a very experienced individual, and without further ado, I grant him the floor so that he can share his experience, because we've heard experiences from the official sector with recommendations from Angela, from Beatriz Martinez, but now we want to hear the experience that you are having in the private sector, pig farmers specifically. So, Dr. Karam, the floor is all yours.
Antes que nada, les agradezco mucho a ICA.
Thank you very much. I thank, first of all, the ICA, the working group of the Jeff Star, and OMSA, also the opportunity that is given to us in the private sector to be able to participate in such an interesting webinar as this one that we are sharing today. To share the experiences of the activities, of the important activities and the work to show the relevance that each one of the countries has that conforms OIPOR and how they have been establishing strategies that are very special to be able to carry out the communication of risk. It is clear that the representation of each one of the countries has different possibilities of persuasion and communication. To board the conditions of each one of the countries is very complicated because each country is different. But we have tried to concentrate on, in this presentation, the bases that are communicated for each one of the countries with which we establish the priority basis to be able to carry out this risk communication. If we go to the next slide, please. These activities have been based on 6 main points, and this does not exclude the fact that there might be many other topics. And the first is the diversity of the economic, political, social, and economic resources. The analysis for the behavior of the transcontinental transmission of the swine fever, in our case, African swine fever, and other type of illnesses that might be given at a given moment as an emerging illness. The events to be able to prepare national organisms and personnel that is specialized in each one of the countries with all that, those that have been able to carry out such important exercises as the drills. The increase of the coordinated actions to avoid the introduction of ASF to the countries through the border lines, which are ports, airports, and border lines, land border lines. The coordination and synergies like the one that we are carrying out today between the producers, the governments, and international organisms is very important. Official agreements by way of which sanitary measures are established to prevent the introduction of a transbordering virus. And the strengthening of the surveillance capacities and diagnose in our case of the ASF. Next one, please. In the first point, we have to understand that it is fundamental to maintain Latin America and the Caribbean, even with a outbreak that we had in La Española and in Haiti, free of the presence of ASF, after the unexpected outbreak of the Dominican Republic. The region continues on being free of the presence of the virus, but as a consequence of the what was mentioned before, with the increase of the risk of being having a possible dissemination throughout the continent, and the greater risk and the prevention, in this case, the communication as we are seeing it, according to the previous presentations, is something that is extraordinarily important. Next slide, please. In the topic of economic diversity, and I refer specifically to the resources that each one of the countries might put at the disposition of establishing the special surveillance programs, are very varied, as it has been commented, in the different regions. And as a consequence, this complicates the projection of programs, similar programs, to be able to develop them, which gives way to the fact that each country will establish different policies in spite of knowing how important this illness is. And this makes it that Latin America is running a greater risk of a possible outbreak of the virus in the continent. The preceding also comes hand in hand with the political development of each one of the countries and by the social impact that this brings along. Not all of the countries that make up OIPOR, the consumption of the animal protein, and especially that of the hog or the pig, it has the same importance. Does it have the same developments? There are some countries in which its production is very slow, and there are countries that in which they are right in the middle of their production, and their per capita consumption is something that is incredible. And this makes the presence of the virus be much more relevant at any moment, and therefore to have to put more attention to the communication system that they require, so that we can prevent the presence of the virus. This puts in danger the production of animal protein. As we all know, this is essential for the good nutrition of the society. Next one, please. In regard to the behavioral analysis of the transcontinental infection of PPA of AFS, since the present, the illness was done in Asia, and with the possibility of jumping from one continent to the other, as we have already seen, in other illnesses that affect the hogs, and then in some of the countries are still free of that, the official dependencies of sanitary animal sanitation and the higher networks for veterinary services, they gave themselves to the task of carrying out communication programs and the task of studying the behavior of the transmission of the virus, to be able to have meetings all the way from North to Center and South America, including within that the Caribbean, to be able to analyze how we can work in a coordinated manner and reinforce the measures for the transbordering control. This is where the relevance of the issue of today's issues comes into play, which is precisely the communication. Next one, please. The next one, please. The previous one. Yes, please. Thank you. That one. The previous one is to avoid the coming of the illness into the region, and it is worthwhile to mention that the diversity of borders as well as their control has made it more complicated to maintain the border cross lines on the surveillance. It is different in airports and marine ports where we can make use of greater technologies and resources, but this is where the importance of the creation of groups such as the Jeff Star in the region of the Americas is important. Taking into account that the virus has continued on expanding in Europe, Asia, Africa. I'm sorry, it seems that we lost sound. Dr. Karam, I'm sorry, we cannot hear you. Dr. Karam? Sorry, can you hear me now? Yes, yes, we can now hear you back. It seems that I was kicked out of the presentation by the web. Sorry. Don't worry, you're back with us again. It's okay. The preceding is to avoid, obviously, the incoming of the illness to the regions. It is important to point out that the diversity of the borders as well as the control has made us maintain a more complicated job at the borderlines. I think that this is something we had already commented, and it is a difficulty of the diversity of borders, which we have the next slide for. Could you go to the next slide, please? Yes, that one. Thank you. The segments that initially outline the work since the presence of the virus, as we commented just a moment ago, to determine the efficacy with which we can work on this communication and an adequate and timely reaction on the state with organizations, international organizations, that give an idea of the deployment of resources that would be necessary, the protocols and the stakeholders that would have to participate, all that with notice and the participation of what is today, nowadays, EMSA. The next slide, please. The next one, please. If we could go to the next one, please. Derived from the preceding, the experience that has been lived in other countries has allowed us to establish strategies for the surveillance, as well as to develop models and threats for the African swine fever. Establishing actions for greater relevance and points that are considered to be of higher risk as a plan for the strengthening of the actions. Next one, please. Given the epidemiological development of this illness, especially of the ASF, it is involved to the product chains of products and subproducts derived from swines. And this gives the way to alerts, and it has made awareness among different sectors, such as travelers, veterinarian physicians, technicians from the sector, as well as involving the sector for the balanced food sector and their distributors of raw material, which has taken us to in a different level, depending on the country and depending on the action. This is where the levels of communication vary, and they can be carried out in X or Y forms, depending on the possibilities that each one of the countries might have, and the cooperation, the very important cooperation of international organizations, such as the ICA, the OMSA, the FAO, the Jeff Star Group, and so forth. So how do we do, or how has it been done by the different countries? It has been to identify the areas of production, which are very, very diverse, that are very different depending on each one of the countries. There are countries that have a very important advancement in the development of an industry and of great companies, and there are companies where 35 to 50% of its production are rural producers or farms that we call backyard farms. And this is what complicates very much the follow-up as well as the communication itself. And this is why, as we can see in the case of Mexico and in the case of Colombia, the exceptional job that has been carried out in the different areas of communication. In those areas, we have to include the identification towards veterinary pharmacies, foliage, the application of assignments to producers to know how well informed they are in regard to the illness, their training given the result of, and something that is very important, the control of the communication that the slaughterhouses might have regarding the official instances for the control of the slaughter. We have in Latin America, the center and South America, a diversity of ways of slaughter and distribution of the animal protein in the case of the hog or the pig. And this complicates very much to be able to communicate any information that we might have at hand at a given moment. The supervision of the veterinarian services, private veterinarian services, and official services, and the coordination between them is exceptionally important because this is where the communication is born. From the private sector and the veterinarian sector that is offering its services to the producer, and it is the first contact with the problem that appears, and to know how to derive them to the official sector that has to maintain the correct communication with the rest of the international instances to be able to coordinate a job. The promotion and follow-up to any notification, as I have mentioned it, is of extreme importance. Next one, please. The strategies for communication, as we have seen it, of the examples of the two countries that preceded me in this webinar, are very diverse. It is very important to have access to manuals for biodiversity, of videos, of critical billboard signs and so forth that attempt to reach the different levels, all the way from the producers in different levels to the sectors of the industry, of the production chain, and the most important, to have an exceptional communication towards the public, consuming public. That is very, very, very important. A bad communication with that sector, with the sector of consumers, might be a terrible mistake, and it would cause an alarm that does not lead us to have a good control of what is happening with the presence of the virus. It is important to have the coordination of infrastructure for the diagnosis, and something that is very important to be able to communicate this diagnosis in time. The analysis to determine the economic impact of the illness is extraordinarily important because it is what the compensations are going to be based with the economic conversations with which we might be able to invite the producers to communicate a given problem at a given moment, which in the majority of the cases of Central and South America does not is not contemplated or does not take place in a project regarding a budget. And this makes the communication at a given moment when the illness might appear to make it much more complicated. The analysis for the planning, the zoning, and the compartmentalization in view of the illness, and the projects for strategic contribution, like the ones we have been talking about, in the presence of the official authorities are very important. And that is why it is extremely relevant to work with the private sector through the different authorities that nowadays are heading this type of effort, so that we might be able to carry out the activities for the dissemination, which are extraordinarily important. The next slide, please. As I have been mentioning, we have established different actions depending on the possibilities of each one of the countries. And apart from that, the coordination between the different countries is also important. Here I would have to put within quotation marks. We are talking about Central America, Central and South America. But for FEDIPOR, as a Latin American organization, it is very, very important to have the participants of these two members that are, for example, Portugal and Spain, that have already gone through this problem, and they maintain the alert after having had the illness and having eradicated it. These are the experiences that the private sector go through, and that teach us how things were happening are very exceptional in the sector of producers, in such a way that we have carried out participations of more staff in the areas of surveillance, accompanied majorly by canine binomials, canine inspectors in the international airports, where the inspection of the equipment has been fundamental for flights coming into the regions coming from countries with the presence of the virus with high risk, be it direct or with stops. The epidemiological surveillance on the field with official authority officials is something that is very important. We have the strict prohibition of admission of products and subproducts or byproducts of pork with the origin of countries that have PPA by applying intelligence sanitary measures, like is the case, for example, as is the case, for example, of Mexico. In Mexico, fortunately, through an agreement that was carried out as of the month of March 2020, with the SICA system and the private sector through OFOMEC, have allowed the OFOMEC staff to co-assist along with the SICA to strengthen the inspection processes in ports, airports, and in some of the borders. This has been thanks to the cooperation of the private sector through the national organization and the federal government that has allowed us to participate with them. These are situations that have not been carried out. They cannot be carried out in all of the countries that conform in the farm nowadays. But the experience and the communication of our experiences in these cases and through the official sectors is something that we transmit, and this is something that is extraordinarily important. What is going to be the review of requirements, sanitation measures for the contention, the visits and the greatest points of admission to be able to analyze the risk, the analysis of the POP entrance of the virus, the resources that are necessary in view of an outbreak, It includes its risk without the disposition, massive disposition of bodies at the ports, in the places where they sell some pork meat in some of the businesses. This determines the areas of risk in the rural areas or in the small corrals with the production of high consumption. The next slide, please. Resulting this from all the above, sorry, there is a spelling error there that has awakened greater interest of the community for the participation of the producers and organizations that are specialized, including processors and traders of this protein, animal protein. The part of surveillance that corresponds to the hogs, the wild hogs, is something that is very difficult, and it has been one of the biggest challenges in the majority of the countries of Latin America, because the inventories, their inventories, are not completely reliable, and the areas of distribution are very diverse geographically, which has complicated to have a greater control as well as a greater surveillance for this type of animals. Nevertheless, in the areas that have a greater closeness to the rural zones of production, have maintained their surveillance, and we are paying attention to the minimum warnings or the doubts of the presence of animals, wild animals, dead animals. This is where the communication and the work of the specialists in communication within the organizations and within the government have a say, and it is very important to have to develop them. The participation of the private sector allow us to have a direct feedback to those who present the recommendations, like the case of OMSA, and in time, it integrates and commit to the animal health, the producers themselves. The experience by in the participation of groups such as these has been very enriching, and it has allowed us that from the inside we might be able to exchange opinions and generate strategies towards one single sense of communication, and such is the case in the sample of the African swine fever. On the other hand, I would like to point out that the illnesses do not understand borders, geographic or political borders. That is why it is important to continue on working in a coordinated manner towards continental health with a very good communication. The diagnosis that might be given in time with the timely communication makes it that the illness will be ahead of the actions that might be taken, which would make it even much more complicated to maintain the continent free of the presence of the virus. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Karam. This comes to complete all the experiences, all the job, the intergovernmental job between the different agencies that is carried out by the private sector. So thank you very much for bringing all this information to us. We are going to go to the section of questions and answers, where all of you will can make use of the experience of Dr. Karam, Angela, Betty. So I invite you to make your questions like you have been doing already through the chat in the webinar. I would like to point out that we have had that participation. They have joined us from Tuxtla, Chiapas. We also have participation from Peru. We have participation of the following organizations: the Veterinarians Association of Hidalgo, animal protein per am in Mexico, the epidemiological surveillance and the pork producers of Jalisco, the Department of Agriculture of the state of Illinois, the ICA, Bucaramanga, and Colombia, the Association of Producers, APSE of Ecuador, from Brazil we have the AMAPA, the CIAPA, Rio Janeiro, Minas Gerais, and the Regional Coordination of Argentina. So it's a pleasure for us to know that we have an integrated audience participating from the private sector. Because at the end, the objective is of this interagency agency group is that all of you, that they might be, the idea is that everybody might be trained in the strategy, the experiences for the prevention and the response to the African swine fever and to other illnesses that are transbordering illnesses. So where I invite you to disseminate these webinars to tell not only the pork sector, but also other sectors that might join on a monthly basis to these webinars, and that they might be ready so that for this we have been developing a platform where we are taking care of this information, as I said before, and we are working under the umbrella of the GFTAT in a way that we are completely coordinated between the agencies, all those agencies, international agencies, regional, sub-regional agencies, standard agencies of America and the Caribbean. And we have been working, and we have been trying to bring together all this information that the agencies generate.
Preparing emergency response, cross-border diseases within a single platform. And we also have all of the information for the webinars. As you know, these webinars are transmitted via social media, and we can rebroadcast them because of all the webinars we've recorded so far. So within this platform, you will find all of the information for all of the webinars, the videos, you can share those as well. This platform is public, so we invite you to share it, to share also your live participation and ask questions within the monthly webinars. Here, our colleagues are adding to the chat the link to our platform so that you may all access it and obtain all of this information, this repository. So after having done this announcement, we move on to Q&A, and we will start with questions. First, we have a question from Beatrice. Here we have one question already, and it reads, could you expand upon how you promote pork safety? And secondly, is there a joint effort together with the authority that defends consumers? Those are the first two questions. Go ahead, please. Thank you very much. Well, technically, there's an area in charge of overseeing, making sure that all of the animals that are slaughtered in the facilities are compliant with the regulations for said purposes. And that's the only instance that verifies and ensures that animals that come into the slaughterhouse come in with verified health, compliant with all of the requirements established. And of course, we, as part of our collaborations, we communicate with the Health Secretariat and with Proseco, which is an authority where consumers can place their complaints. So we coordinate with them, and we try to ensure that African swine fever is, of course, a disease that impacts pigs, but it's not transmissible to human beings. So we don't have the disease, fortunately, but if the presence were ever confirmed, we would send out notifications to that regard in coordination with the Health Secretariat, which is the one that has the direct partnerships to consumers, to individuals, so that they can notify them with regards to the situation with this disease. But I repeat, animals that are slaughtered in any facilities like federal inspections are animals that are healthy and that are sold at the various points of sale, and they are the ones that we are certain are of meat that is of high quality with no transmitted to the consumer. Thank you very much, Betty. There's another question for you, which reads, do you have information with regards to the impact of your messages on your audiences? Meaning, how do you measure that impact? Yeah, well, we have metrics that are measured through social networks. There are platforms that allow us to see what is the impact that we're achieving. The campaigns that we carried out last year, we have a research post-test research that allows us to measure the scope and effectiveness of our communication. It gives us parameters in order to steer it appropriately or enhance it based on the results of this research. Unfortunately, we can't always measure all campaigns through a third party. However, if needed, hopefully not, if we had an incident of African swine fever in Mexico and we implemented communication measures, we would definitely conduct a post-test research on the impact of the communication to the citizenship and to the farmers. Thank you, Betty. And another additional question is the following. How do you tackle the topic of a lack of budget? Do you have alliances with the private sectors, with universities to tackle the... Yes, as I showed in my presentation, there are platforms such as social media, which of course have no cost or very low cost. In fact, the federal government doesn't allow us as the government to hire. It has to all be organic. But in a slide that I showed, we do have liaisons with the state governments and with the organizations that have a strong presence at the state level in each one of the authorities. And they support us in communicating this information. And of course, as was mentioned by the doctor, we have a close partnership with the productive sector, with the organizations, where we are always coordinating our efforts on the communication strategies that need to be implemented, where they also do communication actions. Thank you very much, Betty. And the next question is for Angela. Angela, this is the question. How do you manage the press to ensure a greater level of attention to topics like pest prevention and disease prevention? Because generally speaking, until the problem is not serious, they won't cover the topic. Well, I'm trying here to share my idea, but anyway. Yes, effectively achieving motivation to guarantee that the media publishes information on this topic is not so easy, not until it becomes a serious problem, not until it becomes news. It's important to keep in mind that there are media that can be closer to the audiences that we want to reach out to and that can open these doors for us. But I think that one thing about the importance of these topics is the moving closer to the journalists and the importance of these topics. Sometimes we need to go to one level above, the journalist that covers the source, and go to the directors of the section and the media itself, and that entails a greater effort that would be interesting. Another way is to seek the manner of creating spaces, and it could be simpler than a few years ago. For example, creating our own content that we can publish through blogs, through the various systems of communication. But in any event, I think that building trust, approaching the media, and providing training to journalists can be a mechanism to get their attention on these topics that are important, even though they're not emergencies. Thank you very much, Angela. And I continue with you. There's another question right here, which reads, do you have experience in communicating in the language of indigenous people, or sign language, or documents in Braille for people who have visual disabilities? Well, I did not discuss this topic, and because I know that further ahead, Cecilia Ballesteros will be supporting these webinars, and she's the expert in health education and in the FAO project with regards to foot and mouth disease. A few years ago, they did a very nice work of generating all of the communication messages in the various indigenous languages of the countries linked to the project. That is an effort that is quite important, that needs to be done. Certainly, Cecilia will be telling you about this in the next webinar, or I'm not sure in which one, but she will be sharing this beautiful experience, because it wasn't just the printed materials that were translated, but also a radio campaign was developed where Aler supported us with the translation of these materials. And I think that in a few, we even had spokespersons from the communities themselves, which makes it more important itself. With regards to Braille, we have not explored this. I don't know of any experiences with this. However, if you identify that there's an audience with these types of conditions, then we also need to keep them in mind. It's like we need to keep in mind that, for example, there's a community that has lowered reading capacities. Therefore, you need to tailor your strategy. You need to tailor your strategy to their conditions and needs that are very specific. Thank you very much. Angela? Here, Jorge Ortiz is adding that the Office of the Colombian Agricultural Institute in Colombia in 2021 developed a campaign on the radio in Wayunaiki, the language of the Wayu community, which lives on the border with Venezuela. So it's nice to hear that some of these experiences exist and that there's a whole development of capacities that are inclusive for indigenous communities, for people with disabilities, etc. So thank you very much. Very well. Now we continue with Dr. Karam. Dr. Karam, there's here a question for you. Well, there's a few. The first one being the following. At what level or degree would you qualify the preparation and response by the private sector in the region to deal with African swine fever? It's very difficult to assess. It's extremely difficult. We have countries that have a lot of activity and that are, as we say, in Mexican Veracruz, that really are rolling up their sleeves, and they're working really well. Just as the coordination we just saw from Senacica, Mexico, the case of Colombia, Panama is doing some excellent, and they are really working hard. but through the Organization of Producers of Peru, they are also, and so on and so forth in the various countries. But I cannot deny also that there are countries that, because of economic conditions, political or social conditions, they put our whole continent at many countries that are allowing imports of animal protein that is derived from pork that come directly from countries where there are outbreaks of African swine fever, and they don't have the slightest control or its supervision or control. And even though this sounds strange, it is a very strong risk, and it's a very high risk that we are all running in our, because we don't have any control whatsoever over these imports. And there is no information whatsoever of what we're talking about. There's no awareness or any communication towards official authorities in these countries. Therefore, I cannot give a quality score as far as quality control or oversight or communication as far as ASF is concerned. It varies a lot in Mexico or Central America or the Patagonia. It's definitely a very high risk. And due to this, these topics, such as communication, are extremely important. Thank you very much, Dr. Karam. And well, that's why, and that's the whole goal for us as cooperation agencies to do this work, not just towards the official sector, but also towards the private sector, the academic sector, and other sectors. This constant struggle for training so that people can continue to focus on combating AFS and other cross-border diseases. That's our goal. That's the goal of this effort. And hopefully, all of this development, these topics, this valuable information can be leveraged and shared by the various sectors. There is another question for you, Doctor. What subsector of the pork production chain do you think that sanitary education and risk control education should focus? Gosh, I think that it's all a chain which starts in the primary sector. From there, all of the elements that involve production, and I'm talking about veterinary service, veterinary medicine, balanced feed, raw materials for the feed, are all very important. From there onwards, everything is related, and it's a single risk chain that we cannot break down and say this is more important than that. Obviously, the importance starts with the primary sector, which is production, but everything else can collapse or can have a good outcome depending on how communication and surveillance, for example, in the tourist sector, which has been proven to be an important sector that can be highly problematic, that has one of the highest chances of contagion for a country at any given point. That can be an important detail. So I think that all of the subsectors, I think that the whole chain that is involved with the production of pork is equally important. If we lose track of one of the links in this chain, we risk undermining the whole chain. Thank you very much, Doctor. And there is another question here, and it reads, what recommendations can you provide with regards to the relationship between the private sector and small farmers or home farmers to have a joint communication with ASF? I think that that is the most important part that all of the countries in Latin America face, Central and South America as well, all of Latin America, and which unfortunately it was experienced firsthand by Haiti and the Dominican Republic. Just like these countries in the Caribbean, Central and South America has a lot of home farming. And that's where it becomes very difficult. And we are aware that this is the greatest risk. Communicating with this part of the population is the hardest. And incredibly so, it reaches out to them more through the communication to consume than whatever we could try to attempt directly to small farmers. And I'm talking small farmers, the guy who has 2 or 3 pigs in his backyard. He is not paying any attention to what the organization says or what the government is saying. He's just paying attention to the general communication, the general public's communication that he is daily exposed to, as any other consumer is, because oftentimes those they own are for self-consumption. And so therefore they keep that type of direct communication with organizations or with the official sector. And it's very difficult, very, very difficult to reach out to them, which is why I believe that communication, specialized communication, is very important, because if we want to reach out to consumer, we need to be sufficiently careful not to cause a panic, but be able to alert the citizenship and the producers at every level of the risks that a disease like this can have, as ASF can have. The sector of backyard farming is a highly risky sector for all of Latin. And continuing along the same lines of backyard farming, we're being asked here, have you implemented a way of analyzing the impact of communication measures, in particular with backyard farmers? OIPORC have data countries. In some countries, yes. In some countries, yes. I don't want to insist on the same point, but it has left us a great experience for the continent, the problem faced by the Dominican Republic. The vast majority of farmers is within the rural backyard farming sector, and it was very hard to communicate with them. That communication was highly complex, and it's where we realized that the actions were progressing slowly due to a lack of communication, and therefore the virus was one step ahead of us. The virus was one step ahead of us, and the actions that were being carried out throughout all of the organizations and by the government itself was one step behind because of a lack of communication. There was a time that passed between diagnosis, events, between what was going on, and that meant that the disease progressed while the farmers came to an agreement with regards to what was going on. It's very difficult to achieve. That is something that we need to coordinate. Each country has to coordinate with our own national organizations and with our experts in communication. Yes, that is the most complex part of communication. Thank you very much, Doctor. And well, in closing, here we have an input by Dr. Moises Margasran, who was an animal health officer from the FAO Regional Office for Latin America and the Caribbean. And he makes a comment. He says, in the countries of Latin America and the Caribbean, the usage of cartoons without any text is ideal and has a good impact among people who speak different dialects. In Mexico, it was used successfully in the program to eradicate other different pests. And we also have a question by Dr. Vargas Teran, and it's out for everyone. Have you considered a strategic alliance between countries and pig farmer associations to support the Dominican Republic and Haiti in eradicating ASF and thus reduce the risk for the pork industry of the whole? Well, I don't know if Dr. Karam wants to start with this, and we as international institution can also provide our own input, whether Beatrice and Angela wants to provide their input. Also feel free to open your mics, please. Go ahead, Doc. Yes, definitely there was a coordination from the confirmation of the outbreak, which unfortunately was done late because at the time the Dominican Republic did not have the means to confirm the presence of the virus. They had to wait and wait for confirmation by the US with regards to the presence of the virus. When the communication was done, there was coordination by all of the authorities at the international level. And I'm speaking of AICA, FAO, EMSA, and we also had present the specialists on African swine fever. And today, aside from having established a containment strategy, post-outbreak surveillance, and the continuity of its eradication, which is still being carried out. Yes, it continues to today's date. Yes, there have been efforts, and unfortunately, they were emergency because nobody expected it to be like this. So, again, as I repeat, viruses know no borders. And they proved it in this occasion. But there was coordination between the private sector, the official sector of the Dominican Republic, and subsequently by the international organization. Thank you very much, Dr. Karam. I don't know if Betty or Angela want to make any comments about this. Sorry, I think that this integration is fundamental, and the experiences that we've had in all of the countries can provide their input to what is happening in the Dominican Republic. So I think that from communication teams, there should be an integration that is generated in order to support the processes that are carried out there. And through these projects generated by the various international organizations, it promotes certain important networks that allow us to share experiences, even components that were already designed, materials that were created that can be helpful to other veterinary services from other countries so that they can make progress more quickly. And this contributes to improve the economic situation that oftentimes is an obstacle in doing communication efforts. So what the doctor mentions is very important, and I think that that integration needs to be consolidated. Thank you very much, Angela. Betty? Thank you, Erica. Actually, this is a topic that I don't have all of the elements, but I can say that you as international organization must have a broader outlook of all of the cooperation that has existed among countries in light of ASF in the Dominican Republic. But that is an action that is carried out by the technical area. So as far as communications material, we don't have that coordination. It would be great if we could have it to share what each country has created as communication elements so that it can be used by all of the areas. However, with regards to the technical side, I don't have the elements to give you a reply that would be official. Thank you very much, Betty and Angela. Yes, Doctor. Eric, if you would allow me just 1 second. I just wanted to make a comment that starting from the notification of the presence of ASF in Asia and its development in the continent, Asian and Occidental, an important effort was done, and immediately, together with the US, Mexico, and Canada, we started training in an OIPOR conference in Panama, the working group of Jeffestat for cross-border diseases. This was a very immediate reaction. And based on that, one of the good results that we had was communication between the private sector and the official sector through the Jeffestat group that has worked very effectively. In fact, thanks to this group and your participation today, we have this webinar and those that are passed as well.
Gracias, Dr. Karam. Sí,
Thank you very much, Doctor. Yes, that's what I would like to compliment by saying that any contribution on behalf of Dr. Camposano, also please feel free to do so. And yes, effectively, under the umbrella of the CFSTAR, we have developed a whole initiative, a whole organization to be able to cooperate technically with everything that has happened, with all the events that have happened in Latin America, Dominican Republic, and Haiti, and we're going to see it in the next webinar, which is the one for crisis communication, because this type of communication of risk was not something that can be done by those countries that already had the event, and we're going to have the next webinar with the participation on behalf of Dominican Republic, talking about their experience in the part of communication of crisis, and some of the contributions of the agencies that have participated in the coordination in Dominican Republic and Haiti, like it has been OIRSA, like the Department of Agriculture of the United States, APHIS, and also there have been other organizations integrating all this communication. Organization, not only communication, but also in other aspects like diagnose, biosecurity, and we have had the agencies integrated, like FAO, the OMSA, the ICA. So it has been a complete job, interagency job of cooperation for the Espanol island. Dr. Camposano, yes, of course. Added to what has been said, that is the attention of GSTAR. Definitely. At the local level, since the question is addressed to the countries and the organizations, also with the support of the international organisms that have an inherence in the region, which are more specifically the FAO and the OIRSA. They have been very much hand in hand, working with OIRSA IT, talking in Haiti and Dominican Republic, particularly, obviously, everything under the umbrella of CFSTAR. In the chat, I have put the part in Spanish where you can find all the information, and we have all the regional experience that was born based precisely on these cases of Dominican Republic and Haiti. And so based on that is that we're doing these activities, and as Dr. Elsa was mentioned, these webinars are precisely a response so all the countries might be ready and trained to carry out their plans, their operational procedure manuals, and that they may be in the capacity of responding adequately for any threat of AFS. APS or ASF, and any other transbordering virus. Dr. Camposala, thank you. And with that, we finish this block of questions and answers. And since the mention was made, yes, effectively, our next webinar. And we're going to have all, for the experience of crisis, we're going to have all the experience lived in the Dominican Republic, all the tools for cooperation in the communication of crisis, some of the agencies that participate, such as the USDA and the OIRSA. And we're going to have other technical advices and recommendations in the communication of crisis. So it still is a part of communication. This series of webinars that we have had since last year have not finished. We still have a communication of crisis, and that is set for the 28th of May. And we will have also for April the 25th, that of zoosanitary. So March the 28th, and for April the 25th, that of zoosanitary education, that, as you may see, it is already planned, and we already have planned several months of webinars. So please try to communicate all this information, all this initiative. This is something very big, to have the detail in depth, an adequate preparation to respond to and prevent the emergency of African swine fever and other transbordering illnesses. And so with that, thanks Dr. Karam, Betty, Angela, for their wonderful presentations, all the experience, and well, take everything that you have said today as a referral.
Nos preparemos y para que pues ver que todo esto es un gran esfuerzo, pero da magníficos resultados. Así que
sorry, she's breaking out.
Gracias a los tres.
And that this is going to give us wonderful results. So thanks to the three of them.
OMSA, porque
thanks to
siempre están ayudándonos ahí con las preguntas, a todo el equipo del IICA,
to all the team of the ICA, all the people from translation,
en la parte de tecnología, todas las asistentes,
everybody that helps in the part of technology, all the administrative aides, and all the other technicians that are helping us, Dr. Camposano, for being with us. So thanks to all of you.
Hay mucha gente tras cortinas, así que
there is a lot of people behind scenes. So thanks to all of you. See you next month in this same way. So a warm greeting to all of you until next time. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Thank you. Goodbye. Thank you.
Gracias, Betty. Gracias, doctor Karam. Gracias.
Gracias a ustedes.
Gracias a ustedes. Gracias.